Is college football broken? That's the big topic of the week, but has it ever really been anything else? Every fall, millions of us tune in with the hope that this year the system will make more sense, that the best teams will get their shot, the rankings will be fair, and the champion will be settled on the field. But as soon as the first playoff rankings drop, the debate begins. Who's overrated? Who got snubbed? I mean, why does it always feel like the same teams have the inside track? Always the same teams. Today, I just want to dig into that feeling. I want to ask not just if college football is broken, but why it's always been that way. And why, for better or for worse, that's part of what makes the sport so compelling, so great, so interesting. Last season, 2024, was the first year of the 12-team playoff. For the first time, we had all the conferences had guaranteed spots. The 4 highest ranked conference champs received first round byes, no matter what their overall ranking was. The idea was to reward conference champions and create more access. Instead, all 4 teams that received byes lost their first round playoff games, and you had lower seeded teams with easier paths to the championship. So now, for 2025, the system was changed again. The top 4 teams in the committee's rankings, regardless of conference championships, get the byes, which is good. This is a good change. Probably should have been done from the beginning. But the message is clear. Reward the best teams, not just the ones with a conference title. But we're still going to have the same debate. Is this the right thing for college football? The thing is, power conferences dominate the playoff field. The SEC and the Big Ten, in particular, have more teams than anybody else. They have more money. They have the most influences. They literally wrote lines in the contract to give them all the power. And so now the SEC and Big Ten are pushing for a 16-team playoff that would guarantee 4 automatic bids for SEC and Big Ten, 2 automatic bids for the ACC and Big 12, and just 1 for the group of 5, and then you'd have 3 at large. So the writing's on the wall here. The big brands want control of the sport's future. I mean, we've been hearing, chirpings, rumblings about the SEC and Big Ten pulling out of the NCAA. We know the groundwork has been laid there, and it'll probably happen one day. So even as the format changes, the power dynamics are the same. To understand why college football is the way it is, why are you the way you are? Before the playoff, there was the BCS. It was all human polls with computer rankings, was supposed to be objective, but it wasn't. It was good, but it still sparked debate. The formula wasn't very transparent, and every season seemed to end with at least one team feeling robbed. It was inevitable. And then go back even further than that. It was just the polls. You have the AP and the coaches poll. Each would crown their own champion, sometimes picking different teams. You'd had shared championships, split titles. That was not a rare thing. But every attempt to fix college football has simply just changed the nature of the debate. The BCS shifted the argument from who's number 1 to who's number 2. The playoff moved that line to 4. But controversy never goes away. It just moves. And that's part of the reason why we love it so much. College football has always been broken and has always been subjective. I know that last part is not news to anybody. But let's look at the rankings. Whether it's polls, computers, or committees, the rankings are always a matter of opinion. There's no universally accepted way to compare teams from different regions, different schedules, different resources. Every ranking system's built on assumptions. And then you look at NIL and recruiting. The recruiting landscape is more complicated than ever. NIL was supposed to be this thing that allowed players to get paid off their personal brand. Finally give them the right to make money off their own name, image, and likeness, hence NIL. But it's turned into anything but that. But it's devolved into pay for play. You have schools and their collectives are now just raising money specifically to fund what are essentially player salaries. And there's no oversight, there's no salary cap, no guarantee that the player will even be there a year from now. Now, that may change in the next few months or years. Hopefully it does. We've heard some really good frameworks laid out there that would really help this particular piece of the situation. But there's just more uncertainty. There's more chaos. You can make an argument that there's more parity. I mean, we saw some teams like Indiana have really good years, but regardless, it's still the teams that have always been there, that have always been at the top. And these programs with the deepest pockets and the most aggressive collectives, they have the biggest advantage. While smaller schools, smaller collectives, they might get one game-changing player. So the disparity between the haves and the have-nots is still there. Power conferences always have had more money, more exposure, more influence. The SEC and Big Ten are pulling away from the rest of the sport, and not just on the field, but like I mentioned before, pulling out of the NCAA. The group of five is really just lucky to get a single spot, period. Do they really even have a shot at a national championship? Maybe not. I doubt it. But they're just happy to be there because they get paid. And then you look at realignment. Conference realignment has just killed a lot of tradition. A lot of tradition that college football fans have grown up knowing, loving, hating is another way to think about it. But you look at rivalries and they're all, you see rivalries getting sacrificed. I mean, there's talks that USC versus Notre Dame rivalry is going away. You got your classic in-state rivalries are going away. I mean, for years we saw the dissolution of the Texas A&M rivalry until Texas just recently joined the SEC, and now it's back. And the geographic logic is just out the window nowadays. I mean, ACC has teams on the West Coast. That makes no sense. They're the Atlantic Coast Conference. And the same for the Big Ten. I mean, they got more than 10 teams. But who's counting? But the sport's always going to be structured and shaped by money and not necessarily competition or history. It's who's bringing the dollars. If college football's so broken, why do we care? Why do we keep coming back? In my opinion, it's because the debate is the sport. Every week, there's something to argue about: rankings, playoff spots, snubs, conference strength, players, who's the best. It never ends. There's always something. Basically, because the lack of a level playing field means that every season is mostly unpredictable, and every team has a different path, and everyone has something to complain about. And don't we love to complain? The imperfection is what keeps the sport alive. If the system were truly fair and objective, maybe the passion wouldn't be there. If it becomes fully just played on the field, I mean, are decided on the field, is it just going to be seen as, like a minor league for the NFL? I mean, it's essentially what it's becoming. Hard to say, but all of this chaos is what keeps us invested, along with our love for our teams and traditions. But this is the part that keeps it in the forefront and is where you see the most passion. So back to the first year of the 12-team playoff, it showed some promise, but had a lot of flaws. The automatic buys for conference champions, regardless of ranking, led to top teams having tougher roads to the championship, and is what is prompting the move this season to the straight seeding, which is going to be great. But the debate over fairness and access, it remains. And now with power conferences seeking even greater guaranteed representation in a potential 16-team playoff, the tension between inclusivity and exclusivity remains. The question of who truly deserves a shot at the title, it's as contentious as ever. And it's going to be that way until you take the subjectivity out of the sport, which I don't really want to see that happen, because I love the debates. I love having the argument. That's what makes a sport great. So is college football broken? Yes, but it's always been that way. It's always been broken. The subjectivity, the recruiting, power imbalance, these aren't new problems. They're not new. They're baked into the DNA of college football. And that means that the system will never truly be fair. There's a lot of flaws, and they're all real, but so is our love of college football. So, all that being said, I want to hear what your thoughts are. Is the chaos what keeps you watching, or are you ready for something different? Do you think playoff expansion will help, or just make it worse, make it boring? What would you change if you could? Share your opinions, comment, hit that subscribe button. The debate's what makes this sport special, and we definitely want to hear from you. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about some of the news from the week. Like I mentioned before, it's official that the 2025 playoff is going to be changed so that it is straight seeding. So now whatever the final rankings are per the committee, that's going to be the seed. So no longer does it mean that if you won your conference championship, you get a bye. It's going to be the top 4 teams at the end of the season. They get a bye, and everybody else is just in the playoff. And I think it's a good change. I think it removes a lot of the weirdness that we saw from this past year. We saw teams like Boise getting a bye, and then you had Penn State having a pretty easy path through the playoffs, Texas as well, until they met Ohio State. And it wasn't really fair for some of the teams that actually got a bye or won their conference. So I think it's a good change. I'm glad they did that. Simplifies things, removes any confusion, and I think it's just a better way for doing the playoffs. It should have been done from the beginning. So in addition to all the playoff format changes, we had a press conference from Greg Sankey just talking about those changes and just answering a lot of questions from the media. One of the big topics is around non-conference scheduling and the SEC potentially moving to 9 games. Greg said he doesn't want to see teams walking away from big games, and I wholeheartedly agree. One cool thing about the conference realignment is that you're seeing matchups that you normally wouldn't see unless it was a bowl game. I mean, Georgia and Texas during the regular season. That's a great example of that. And you still want to see the big out of conference games, because usually you kick off the season, big game, and that really sets the tone for the season. And it's a good thing for the teams that play in those games, regardless of if you win or lose. Because if you win, great. You are coming out strong. You're riding a heater. But if you lose, at least it was early in the season. And the earlier you lose, the quicker people forget about it. So I don't want to see those games go away. They're always great. They're always fun. We always want to see the best teams play. So who knows? Maybe, the new playoff system, if they actually move further away from rankings, we might see more of these bigger games. Now, Greg also talked about the SEC schedule potentially moving to 9 games. I know people from other conferences have been advocating that for a while. Lots of arguments over Thanksgiving between my SEC family and my Big Ten family. Very memorable. I won't go into the details, but the SEC playing 9 games was a big part of that discussion. And I think it makes sense. And I like Greg Sankey's stance on this, where he supports the 9-game schedule, but it depends on the CFP format. Because like any good commissioner, he wants to get as many teams into the playoff from his conference as possible. And I'm all for that. So I don't know. Do you want to see the SEC play 9-game schedule, or are you good with where it's at? Is the SEC gauntlet tough enough as is? I mean, you can make arguments either way. I think part of the SEC side of the family's argument was, yeah, it's a gauntlet. It's not like any other conference. It's definitely the deepest conference. I think the top teams from the Big Ten have caught up with the top teams of the SEC, and really they've passed them. We talked about that last week, about Urban Meyer's assessment of the SEC versus Big Ten, and it's true. I mean, the last 2 national champions came from the Big Ten, and they're the same teams are going to be competing for national championships this year. But I do think the SEC is deeper, and it's a tougher schedule as a whole. So 8 games, 9 games might not even really matter, because expanded playoff at some point, that just means you get more chances to lose, or losses don't hurt you as much. Sankey spent a lot of time talking about the playoff format. He even got really heated there for a minute when someone asked him about the decisions that are getting made, and what kind of effort does he put in to make decisions that are in the best interest of the game, as opposed to just the SEC. And I think he really took offense to that, because in all fairness to him, I mean, his number one priority is the SEC. That's what league he is the commissioner of. And when you're in that type of role, you got to think what's good for the SEC is going to be good for everybody else, whether that's true or not. That's just how you have to approach it. And he said he's very open-minded to different playoff formats, not committed to any model. And what was interesting to me was that, he wasn't necessarily for the playoff expansion in the first place. One of his points was, if we still had the 4-team playoff, the SEC would have half the field. You'd have Georgia and Texas last year, which is true. And, he warned about automatic bids, potentially reducing the SEC's overall representation. So there's a lot of negotiating going on, and I'm really looking forward to some clarity over the next few months, probably the next year, because we still have 1 more year of this current format. But after that, it's really up to the SEC and Big Ten to decide what it's going to be, because they have all the power. He also was talking about strength of schedule and how that should matter more in the CFP rankings. And this is where I think a lot of people are calling him out. He's contending that the committee didn't really take into account strength of schedule. He was saying that a team that beat Georgia, that didn't matter as much as, what team they lost to. And I think that was the big debate at the end of the season, regardless. So in his mind, the SEC schedule is, as he says, different from everybody else's. Again, going back to that 8 versus 9 game season schedule. And he wants to see the CFP really reward stronger schedules. And I think that's the right approach, because it's in alignment with wanting to still see the big games, the big out of conference games, and get rewarded for playing those types of games and playing just really tough schedule. Yeah, he also talked about play-in games and where they might factor in potentially playing games during championship weekend, which could involve teams ranked 3rd through 6th within the conference fighting for that last playoff spot. He's open to the concept if it keeps more teams engaged late in the season, but didn't want to move away from getting rid of the SEC championship game. And I'm just not really a fan of having an SEC championship game the way it is today if we're going to keep expanding the playoff. I don't think it makes sense. I don't think it's fair to the teams that play in that game, especially if you're the higher ranked team. I guess the most fair way to do it is you take your top ranked teams, whoever wins the regular season, put them in, let them play in the playoff, and go from there. I love the idea of playing games for the teams that didn't finish at the top of the conference, giving them a chance to make one of those at-large bids or one of the automatic qualifying spots. However, the conferences decide to do that. I think that would be good. I think it would also keep the importance of the regular season, and I think that's a good thing for the sport. But we want to hear what your thoughts are. Give us a comment, hit a like, hit that subscribe button. We want to hear from you. What do you think about Sankey's comments? Where do you stand on the playoff structure? Let us know. But until next week, I'm Burl, and this is the Nitro Show. Go Dogs.